Have you ever made a decision so reckless it split your life into before and after in a single heartbeat? For Sienna, that moment wasn't running from the man who broke her heart. It was who she ran to. Picture this: a crowded VIP lounge in New York's meatpacking district, a toxic ex-boyfriend closing in, and a terrified girl who makes the wildest gamble of her life, sitting on the lap of the most dangerous man in the room to pretend she belongs to him. She thought she was borrowing a shield. She didn't realize she was handing herself over to a weapon. Because when Gabriel Santoro leaned in, he didn't tell her to get off. He whispered 7 words that locked the cage door behind her. This is the story of how a desperate escape became a deadly obsession. The bass in the gilded cage was heavy enough to rattle the fillings in Sienna's teeth, but it couldn't drown out the sound of her own heart hammering against her ribs. It was October 14th, a Friday. Sienna remembered the date because it was supposed to be her Freedom Day. She had moved to a new apartment in Queens, changed her number, and finally convinced herself that Caleb was part of her past. She had come out tonight only because her best friend, Chloe, had practically dragged her out of the house, swearing that top-shelf tequila was the only cure for PTSD. But 10 minutes ago, the air in the club had shifted. Sienna was standing near the velvet ropes of the VIP section, nursing a watered-down cranberry vodka. When she saw him, Caleb, he wasn't alone. He was scanning the crowd with that predatory, manic look she knew too well. The look that meant he wasn't sober, and he wasn't happy. He spotted Chloe near the bar. He grabbed her arm. Sienna saw Chloe flinch. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded Sienna's veins. If Caleb saw her, there would be a scene. There would be screaming, maybe a fist, and definitely a ride home in a police cruiser that wouldn't actually protect her. She needed to disappear. She spun around, looking for an exit, but the dance floor was a wall of sweating bodies. The only way out was past Caleb. No, 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 she whispered. Backing up, she bumped into a heavy velvet rope. Behind her was the ultra VIP section, the do not enter zone. The bouncer had stepped away for a split second to deal with a scuffle near the DJ booth. Without thinking, driven by pure animal instinct to survive, Sienna unhooked the rope and slipped inside. The atmosphere here was different. The air was cooler, smelling of expensive leather, Cuban cigars, and danger. The music was muffled, replaced by the low hum of serious conversations. She scanned the dark booths. She needed cover. She needed to look like she belonged, or security would toss her right back out to Caleb. Her eyes landed on the center booth. It was occupied by 4 men. But the one in the middle commanded the space like a king on a throne. He was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Sienna's student loans. He had dark hair, slicked back, and a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite. He wasn't talking. He was listening to a man with a scar on his cheek, his hand resting casually on a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. Sienna looked back. Caleb was pushing through the crowd. He had seen her. His eyes locked onto hers, widening with a twisted mix of rage and delight. He started shoving people aside, coming straight for the VIP rope. She had 3 seconds. If she stood alone, Caleb would grab her. If she ran, he would chase her. She needed a shield. She needed to be untouchable. Sienna took a breath that tasted like fear and stepped toward the center booth. She didn't look at the bodyguards who tensed up. She locked eyes with the man in the charcoal suit. His eyes were dark, almost black, and completely unreadable. She didn't ask. She didn't hesitate. Sienna walked right up to him. turned around, and sat directly on his lap. The entire booth went dead silent. The music seemed to stop. She felt the man's body go rigid beneath her. His thighs were hard as iron. She could feel the heat radiating off him through the thin silk of her dress. "Please," she whispered, grabbing the lapel of his jacket, burying her face in the crook of his neck to hide from Caleb. She smelled sandalwood, gunpowder, and rain. "Just play along, please." She waited for him to shove her off. She waited for the bodyguards to drag her away. She squeezed her eyes shut, trembling, waiting for the humiliation. But it didn't come. Instead, a large, warm hand settled on her waist. It was heavy, possessive. He didn't push her away. He pulled her closer, anchoring her against his chest. "Easy," the man said. His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated through her spine. Sienna risked a glance toward the entrance of the VIP section. Caleb had reached the rope. He was fuming, his face red. He looked ready to storm in, but then he saw where Sienna was. He saw the man holding her. Caleb's face went pale. The rage evaporated, replaced instantly by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. He took a step back, hands raised in an apology to no one, and turned around, disappearing into the crowd as fast as he could. Sienna let out a shaky breath, her body sagging with relief. "He's gone," she whispered. "Thank God." She went to stand up. "Thank you. I'm so sorry. I just needed." The hand on her waist tightened. It wasn't a comforting hold anymore. It was a clamp. Sienna tried to rise, but she was pinned. She froze, looking up at the man. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at her. His expression was calm, terrifyingly indifferent, but his eyes were sharp. "You don't walk into the lion's den to hide from a dog. Little bird," he said softly. I have to go," Sienna stammered, her heart starting to race for a different reason. "No," he said, taking a sip of his drink with his free hand, the other still locking her to him. "You just sat on Gabriel Santoro's lap in front of 5 witnesses. You made a statement. Now, you're going to sit there and finish it." The name dropped into Sienna's stomach like a stone. Gabriel Santoro. Even Sienna, who tried to stay as far away from the criminal underworld as possible, knew that name. The Santoro family wasn't just a gang. They were an institution in New York. They owned the unions, the docks, and half the real estate in Manhattan. And Gabriel, he was the eldest son, the enforcer, the one the papers called the ghost, because nothing ever stuck to him. She was sitting on the lap of a man who had likely ordered hits before breakfast. "I didn't know," Sienna breathed, her hands trembling where they rested on his chest. The fabric of his suit was impeccably smooth, brioni. "Maybe. I swear, I didn't know who you were. My ex. He's crazy. I just needed to hide." The man sitting across from them, the one with the scar on his cheek, chuckled darkly. "She's got guts, boss, or a death wish," interrupting a meeting with the Bratva to play hide-and-seek. Gabriel didn't laugh. He set his glass down on the marble table. His hand moved from her waist to her chin, tilting her head up so she couldn't look away. His fingers were rough, calloused, contrasting with the elegance of his suit. "You interrupted a negotiation," Gabriel said, his voice low. "Do you know how much money that interruption just cost me?" I can pay you back," Sienna lied. She had $40 in her checking account and a maxed-out credit card. Gabriel's lips quirked up in a ghost of a smile. It didn't reach his eyes. You can't afford me, sweetheart." He leaned in closer. His breath was warm against her ear, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Here is the situation," he whispered. The sound was intimate, like a lover's secret, but the words were a verdict. "That man you ran from, Caleb Vant, or—" Sienna stiffened. "How do you know his name?" "I know everyone who breathes in my city," Gabriel murmured. "Caleb Vance is a low-level runner for the Rossi family. Our rivals. He's been skimming off the top for months. We were going to pick him up tonight." Sienna's eyes widened. "What?" "By running to me," Gabriel continued, his hand sliding down to rest possessively on her thigh. "You just signaled to everyone in this room, including the Russian gentleman across from us, that you are mine, that you are Santoro property." "I'm not property," Sienna snapped, a spark of her old fire returning despite the fear. Gabriel's grip tightened just enough to be a warning. "Tonight you are. Because if you stand up and walk away right now, the Russians will think I'm weak. They'll think I let a random girl interrupt $1 million deal and walk away unscathed. And if I look weak, bodies start dropping. Starting with yours." Sienna looked at the Russian men across the table. They were watching her with cold, calculating eyes. They were waiting to see what Gabriel would do. If he let her go, he lost face. "So," Gabriel whispered, his lips brushing the shell of her ear. "You have two choices. Choice A, you get up, walk out, and my friend over there takes you and Caleb for a little ride to the Jersey marshes." Sienna swallowed hard. "And choice B?" "Choice B," Gabriel said, pulling her back so her back was pressed flush against his chest. "You stay right here. You smile. You pretend you adore me. You drink my drink. You let everyone believe you belong to me. And when the night is over, I decide what your debt is worth." The air in the booth felt suffocating. Sienna looked at the exit, then at the Russians, then at the lethal calm of Gabriel Santoro. She realized with a sinking feeling that she had jumped out of the frying pan and into a blast furnace. But the memory of Caleb's face, the violence in his eyes, was still fresh. Caleb would hurt her simply because he could. Gabriel was negotiating. Sienna made her choice. She relaxed her body, leaning back against Gabriel. She reached out and took the crystal glass from the table, taking a sip of the amber liquid. It burned going down, fire to match the heat of the man behind her. "Good girl," Gabriel murmured. He shifted slightly, getting comfortable. "Now, smile. Tell Mr. Volkov you're sorry for the interruption, but you just couldn't wait to see me." Sienna turned her head, forcing a bright, dazzling smile toward the scarred Russian. "My apologies," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Gabriel has been promising me this date for weeks. I got impatient." "Mr." Volkov stared at her for a long moment, then threw his head back and laughed. "A woman with fire. I like her. Santoro. She is dangerous. Like you." "You have no idea," Gabriel said dryly. For the next hour, Sienna played the part of the doting mistress. She laughed at jokes she didn't understand. She let Gabriel's hand rest on her knee, his thumb tracing idle, distracting circles on her skin. She ignored the way her body reacted to his touch, the electric current that seemed to arc between them every time he shifted. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. But as the clock struck 2:00 a.m., the meeting wrapped up. The Russians shook hands and left. The bodyguards stepped back. Sienna immediately tried to stand up. "Okay, they're gone. I did what you asked. Can I go now?" Gabriel stood up, towering over her. He buttoned his jacket, his face returning to that impassive mask. "Go," he asked, checking his watch, a Patek Philippe that glinted under the club lights. "No, we're not done." "You said—" "I said I would decide what your debt is worth." Gabriel interrupted. He stepped closer, crowding her space. "Caleb Vance owes me $50,000, since you claimed him as your reason for crashing my meeting, and since you just publicly declared yourself as my woman to the head of the Russian mob, you just inherited his debt." Sienna's jaw dropped. "I don't have $50,000, Gabriel signaled to his guards. "Then we'll have to work out a payment plan. Get in the car, Sienna." "How do you know my name?" she whispered. Backing away, Gabriel stopped. He looked at her, and for a second, the mask slipped. There was something dark and hungry in his eyes. "I told you," he said. "I know everyone. And I've been watching Caleb Vance for a long time, which means I've been watching you, too." He held out a hand. "Come. The night is young, and you have a lot of work to do." Sienna looked at his hand. It was an invitation to hell, but Caleb was out there, somewhere, and Gabriel Santoro was the only monster big enough to scare him off. She took his hand. The ride to Gabriel's penthouse was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavier than screaming. They were in the back of a black armored Escalade, separated from the driver by a privacy partition. Sienna pressed herself against the door, watching the New York City lights blur past. She was waiting for him to speak, to tell her exactly what kind of payment plan involved getting into a stranger's car at 2:00 a.m. Gabriel was on his phone, typing rapidly. The blue light illuminated the sharp angles of his face. He looked calm, almost bored, as if he hadn't just threatened a man's life and kidnapped a woman. "Where are we going?" Sienna asked, her voice cracking. Gabriel didn't look up. "The Tribeca Tower. My home. And what happens there?" He finally locked his phone and slid it into his pocket. He turned to her, his dark eyes scanning her frantic expression. "You sleep, you eat, you stay alive." "I'm not a prostitute," Sienna said, her voice trembling but firm. "If you think—" "I don't think," Gabriel cut her off, his tone sharp. "I know. And I have no interest in forcing a terrified woman into my bed. That's beneath me, and frankly, you're not my type." Sienna blinked, offended despite the fear. "Excuse me." "You're messy," Gabriel said, gesturing to her chaotic hair and the cheap fabric of her dress. "You're emotional. You wear your heart on your sleeve. In my world, those are liabilities. Then why keep me—" "Because," Gabriel said, leaning back as the car slowed down. "You are the only leverage I have against Caleb. He stole something from me, a ledger. It contains names, dates, and account numbers that could put half the city council in prison. He took it as insurance." Sienna felt a chill. "Caleb has evidence against you." "Caleb is an idiot who doesn't know what he's holding," Gabriel corrected. "But he's obsessed with you. He's been stalking you for months. He won't trade the ledger for money, but he might trade it for you." Sienna felt the blood drain from her face. "You're going to trade me like a hostage." The car came to a smooth stop in a private underground garage. The door was opened by a guard before Gabriel could answer. He stepped out and offered her a hand. "I'm not going to trade you," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, low register again. "I'm going to use you to draw him out. You're going to be my fiancé." Sienna froze, ignoring his hand. "You're what, my fiancé?" Gabriel repeated, impatience creeping into his tone. The Santoro family requires stability. My investors are getting nervous about the rumors of a gang war. I need to look settled. I need to look untouchable. And nothing says untouchable like the man who stole his enemy's girl and put a ring on her finger. This is insane, Sienna whispered. This is a movie plot. This isn't real life. This is my life, Gabriel said, grabbing her wrist and pulling her gently but firmly out of the car. And now, it's yours. He led her into a private elevator that opened directly into a penthouse that spanned the entire top floor. It was breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River, modern Italian furniture, and art that belonged in a museum, but to Sienna, it looked like a very expensive prison. The guest room is down the hall to the right, Gabriel said, loosening his tie. There are clothes in the closet. Your size. I had them sent over while we were in the car. Sienna stared at him. How do you know my size? I told you, Gabriel said, walking toward a liquor cabinet. I know everything. Get some sleep. Sienna, tomorrow. We go public. Sienna walked to the hallway, but she stopped and turned back. Why should I trust you? You're a criminal. Gabriel poured himself a drink and looked at her over the rim of the glass. The moonlight hit his eyes, making them look like shattered obsidian. You shouldn't trust me, he said honestly. But out there, Caleb is waiting with a knife. In here, I'm just offering you a role. Be the devil's bride for a few weeks, and I'll wipe your debt and Caleb's existence off the map. Sienna went to her room and locked the door. She didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city, wondering if she had just made the deal that would save her life or end it. The next morning, Sienna was woken up not by sunlight, but by a team of 3 women storming into her room with rolling racks of clothing. Up! Up! A woman with bright red glasses clapped. Mr. Santoro wants you ready by noon. The charity luncheon at the Pierre Hotel waits for no one. For the next 3 hours, Sienna was poked, prodded, waxed, and painted. They dyed her hair a richer, glossier shade of brunette. They tailored a silk emerald green dress to her body until it fit like a second skin. When she finally looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. She looked like a Santoro. When she walked out into the living room, Gabriel was waiting. He was on the balcony, finishing a call. He turned around, and for a split second, he stopped breathing. His eyes raked over her, from the strappy gold heels to the curve of her hip, lingering on her lips. He hung up the phone without saying goodbye. Acceptable, he said gruffly, though the heat in his gaze said something else entirely. He walked over to a safe on the wall, punched in a code, and pulled out a velvet box. Inside sat a diamond the size of a quail egg. It was vintage, Art Deco, and absolutely massive. Give me your hand, he commanded. Sienna hesitated, then extended her left hand. Gabriel slid the ring onto her finger. It was cold and heavy. This belonged to my grandmother, he said softly. Don't lose it. It's worth more than your life. You really know how to make a girl feel special, Sienna quipped, trying to hide her nervousness. We aren't dating, Sienna. We are working. He offered his arm. Let's go. The sharks are hungry. The Pierre Hotel was swarming with paparazzi. As the limo pulled up, flashes erupted like lightning. Gabriel stepped out first, buttoning his suit jacket, then turned to help her. Chin up, he whispered as she stepped onto the curb. Look at me like you're obsessed with me. Touch my arm. laugh at my jokes, and if anyone asks, we met in Paris 6 months ago." "Paris?" Sienna muttered, plastering a smile on her face. "Right." They walked the gauntlet. The reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Santoro, is it true the merger is off? Who is the mystery woman?" Gabriel ignored them all, guiding Sienna through the gilded doors of the ballroom. The room was filled with New York's elite politicians, tech moguls, and, Sienna knew, mobsters in very expensive suits. They took their seats at a center table. Sienna felt eyes on her from every direction. She played her part perfectly, leaning into Gabriel, laughing softly when he whispered commentary about the other guests into her ear. "See that man in the blue tie?" Gabriel murmured, his hand resting on the back of her chair, his fingers brushing her bare shoulder. "That's the district attorney. I own him." "And the woman in red?" Sienna whispered back. "His mistress. I pay for her apartment." Sienna looked at him. "Is there anyone here you don't own?" "You," Gabriel said, looking her dead in the eye. "Not yet." The air between them crackled. Sienna felt a flush rise to her cheeks. She reached for her water glass, her hand shaking slightly. Suddenly, a shadow fell over their table. "Gabriel," a voice boomed. "And a guest." Sienna froze. She knew that voice. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. But she did anyway. Standing there was an older man with silver hair and a cruel smile. Next to him, looking twitchy and sweating in an ill-fitting suit, was Caleb. It was Don Rossi, the head of the rival family, and he had brought Caleb as his +1. "Don Rossi," Gabriel said, not bothering to stand. He took a sip of his wine. "I didn't think you'd show your face after the mess at the docks last week." "I go where I please," Rossi said, his eyes sliding to Sienna. He licked his lips. "And I see you've picked up a stray. Isn't this Caleb's little runaway?" Caleb stepped forward, his eyes manic. "Sienna," he hissed, "take that ring off. You look ridiculous." Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. Everyone at the nearby tables had stopped eating. The tension was thick enough to choke on. "She's not Sienna anymore," Gabriel said calmly, setting his glass down. "She is the future Mrs. Santoro, and I suggest you lower your voice before I have your tongue cut out in the lobby." Caleb laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "She's a waitress. Gabriel, she's nothing. She's mine. I broke her in." The silence that followed was deafening. Gabriel stood up. He moved so fast, Sienna barely saw it. One moment he was sitting. The next, he was standing toe-to-toe with Caleb. He didn't hit him. He didn't yell. Gabriel reached out and straightened Caleb's crooked tie. "You are breathing air that I am graciously allowing you to consume," Gabriel whispered. But in the silent ballroom, everyone heard it. "Disrespect my fiancé again, and I won't kill you. Caleb, I will keep you alive in a basement for a year, and let her decide which piece of you we send to your mother each week." Gabriel patted Caleb's cheek hard. "Now," Gabriel said, turning to Don Rossi, "get your dog out of my sight. He's ruining the ambience." Rossi's face turned purple. He glared at Gabriel, then jerked his head at Caleb. "Let's go." As they walked away, Caleb looked back over his shoulder. He locked eyes with Sienna. He mouthed one word. Soon, Sienna was trembling so hard her silverware rattled against the plate. Gabriel sat back down and immediately took her cold hand in his warm, large one underneath the table. "Breathe," he commanded softly. "He's going to kill me," Sienna whispered. "He's not scared of you." "He is terrified of me," Gabriel corrected. "That's why he's trying to provoke me." He squeezed her hand, his thumb rubbing over her knuckles. "But he made a mistake today," Gabriel said, his eyes tracking Caleb's exit. "What mistake?" "He let me see the fear in his eyes when he looked at you," Gabriel said darkly. "He doesn't just want the ledger back. Sienna, he still thinks he owns you. And that." Gabriel brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in a gesture that was equal parts courtly romance and possessive warning. "That is an insult I will wash away with blood." For the next 2 weeks, the penthouse became Sienna's entire world. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and suffocating. She learned the rhythm of Gabriel Santoro's life. He woke up at 4:30 a.m. He boxed in the private gym for an hour, brutal. Heavy bag sessions that echoed through the hallway like thunder. He drank his espresso black, standing up, reading physical newspapers because he didn't trust digital footprints, and he barely spoke to her. They were engaged to the outside world, appearing in gossip columns and paparazzi shots whenever they left the building. But inside the glass walls of the Tribeca Tower, they were strangers living in a cold war. One rainy Tuesday, Sienna couldn't take it anymore. She found Gabriel in his study. He was staring at a wall of monitors, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and a faint scar running down his left wrist. "I need to leave," Sienna announced from the doorway. Gabriel didn't turn around. "No, I can't just sit here. Gabriel, I have a life. I have a job, well, I had a job. I have friends who think I've vanished." "Your friends have been told you're on a mental health retreat in the Hamptons," Gabriel said calmly, finally swiveling his chair to face her. "And as for your job at the gallery, I bought the gallery this morning. You're on paid leave." Sienna's mouth fell open. You bought the gallery." "It was a sound investment." He shrugged, though his eyes were amused. "And it keeps you safe. Caleb is still out there. Sienna, he's desperate. Rossi has cut him off, which makes him a cornered rat. And rats bite." "I can handle Caleb," Sienna snapped. Though her voice wavered, Gabriel stood up. The amusement vanished from his face. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between them until he towered over her. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You think you can handle him?" Gabriel asked quietly. He reached behind his back and pulled out a gun, a sleek, matte black Glock. He held it out to her. "Handle first." "Take it." Sienna stared at the weapon. I don't like guns." "Take it," Gabriel ordered, his voice brooking no argument. She reached out with a trembling hand and took the gun. It was heavier than it looked, cold and terrifying. "Point it at me," Gabriel said. "What to know?" "Do it. If Caleb walks through that door right now, what do you do? Beg him? Scream, he won't care. Point the gun at my chest. Sienna." Tears pricked her eyes, but the intensity in Gabriel's gaze forced her to move. She raised the gun, her arm shaking violently. She aimed it vaguely at his chest. "You're holding it wrong," Gabriel murmured. He moved behind her, his chest pressed against her back, solid and warm. He reached around, his large hands covering hers, adjusting her grip. "Thumbs forward," he whispered, his breath ghosting over her ear. "Stance wide, elbows locked but not stiff." He corrected her posture, his touch clinical yet burning. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear of the gun anymore, but from the overwhelming proximity of him. He smelled of rain and expensive scotch. "Breathe," Gabriel instructed. "You're holding your breath. You'll miss." Sienna exhaled sharply. "I can't shoot a person." "You won't have to," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a rough growl near her neck. "Because as long as I am breathing, no one touches you. But if I go down, you need to be ready to finish the fight." He didn't let go. For a long moment, they stood there, wrapped in a deadly embrace, aiming at the empty study door. "Why are you doing this?" Sienna whispered, lowering the gun. "Why me? You could have just paid Caleb off. You could have ignored me in the club." Gabriel took the gun from her hands and set it on the desk. He turned her around to face him. His expression was unguarded for the first time, exhausted, wary, and strangely human. "Because," Gabriel said, his thumb grazing her cheekbone, "when you sat on my lap that night, you didn't look at me like I was a monster. You looked at me like I was a savior. No one has looked at me like that in 20 years. The silence stretched, thick with unsaid words. Gabriel leaned in, his eyes searching hers. Sienna's breath hitched. She found herself leaning in too, drawn by a magnetic pull she couldn't fight. His lips brushed hers a feather-light touch, a question rather than a demand. And then the alarm blared. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was a low, pulsing siren that vibrated through the floorboards. Gabriel pulled back instantly, the soldier replacing the man. "Stay here!" he barked, moving toward the door. "Lock it from the inside." "Gabriel, we have a breach," he said, pulling a second gun from a hidden holster under the desk. "Someone just bypassed the elevator codes." Sienna did exactly what Gabriel told her not to do. She waited 3 minutes in the study, listening to the muffled shouts and the sickening thud of bodies hitting walls coming from the living room. Then, she grabbed the heavy brass paperweight from Gabriel's desk and cracked the door open. The penthouse was a war zone. 2 of Gabriel's guards were down near the kitchen island. Glass shattered as a bullet took out the sliding door to the balcony. Gabriel was behind the grand piano, firing calculated shots toward the elevator bank. But it wasn't a tactical team invading. It was chaos. 3 men in ski masks were spraying bullets wildly. They weren't professionals. They were distractions. Sienna saw him before Gabriel did. A 4th man had slipped in through the service entrance near the library. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was wearing a waiter's uniform, blood splattered on the white collar. It was Caleb. He looked deranged. His eyes were wide, pupils blown, sweat drenching his face. He held a jagged hunting knife in one hand and a revolver in the other. He wasn't looking at Gabriel. He was scanning the rooms. He was looking for her. "Sienna!" Caleb screamed, his voice cracking. "I know you're here. Come out, baby. Let's go home." Gabriel turned his head at the sound of Caleb's voice, distracted for a split second. Bang! One of the masked men clipped Gabriel in the shoulder. Gabriel grunted, stumbling back, his aim faltering. "No!" Sienna screamed. She ran out of the study. "Sienna, get back!" Gabriel roared, clutching his bleeding shoulder. But Caleb had seen her. A twisted grin split his face. "There she is, my little actress." He lunged for her. Sienna didn't freeze this time. She remembered the weight of the gun in her hand from 10 minutes ago. She didn't have the gun, but she had the rage. She threw the brass paperweight with all her strength. It struck Caleb square in the forehead. He stumbled, dazed, blood trickling down his face. "You bitch!" he hissed, raising the revolver, but he never got the shot off. Gabriel was there. He moved like a blur, ignoring his own wound. He tackled Caleb, driving him into the marble floor with bone-crushing force. The revolver skittered away. Gabriel didn't just subdue him. He unleashed weeks of suppressed violence. He punched Caleb once, twice, 3 times sickening, wet cracks echoing through the silent room as the other attackers were neutralized by Gabriel's remaining security team. "Gabriel, stop!" Sienna screamed, grabbing his arm. "You'll kill him!" Gabriel froze, his fist raised. His chest was heaving, blood his own, and Caleb's stained his white shirt. He looked up at Sienna, his eyes black holes of fury. "He touched you," Gabriel growled. "He entered my home. He breathed your air." "He's done," Sienna sobbed, looking at Caleb's unconscious, broken form. "It's over." Gabriel stood up slowly, swaying slightly. He kicked Caleb's limp body away as if it were trash. "It's not over," Gabriel said, his voice deadly quiet. "How did he get in?" He looked around the room at his surviving guards. "The codes are encrypted. The elevator requires a retinal scan. The service entrance is biometric." Gabriel walked over to the head of his security, a man named Dominic, who had been with the Santoro family for 30 years. Dominic was clutching a wound in his leg. "Dominic," Gabriel said. "Check the logs, now." Dominic pulled out a tablet, grimacing in pain. He tapped the screen, his face paling as he read the data. "Boss," Dominic whispered. "The codes weren't bypassed. They were authorized." "By who?" Gabriel demanded. Dominic looked up, his eyes darting to the corner of the room where Sienna was standing. "By Sienna," Dominic said. Sienna recoiled as if slapped. "What, that's impossible. I don't even know the codes." Gabriel turned to her slowly. The warmth, the connection, the near kiss in the study, it all evaporated. In its place was the cold, hard mask of the Don. "Show me," Gabriel commanded. Dominic turned the tablet. The authorization came from the iPad we gave her for the gallery work. Access code entered at 4:02 p.m. Service elevator unlocked. "I didn't—" Sienna cried, panic rising in her throat. "I swear, Gabriel, I was reading a book. I didn't touch the iPad." Gabriel stared at her. He was bleeding. He was pumped full of adrenaline, and he was looking at the woman who had just saved his life, but the evidence said she had also opened the door to his executioners. "Caleb is a junkie," Gabriel said coldly. "He doesn't have the tech to hack my system. Someone on the inside had to let him in." "It wasn't me," Sienna pleaded, stepping toward him. "Please, Gabriel, look at me." Gabriel looked at her. He looked at the fear in her eyes. But in his world, trust got you killed. "Lock her in the guest room," Gabriel ordered his guards. "Gabriel." "No. Lock her in," he roared, turning his back on her. "And take Mr. Vance to the basement. Wake him up. I want to know everything before he dies." As the guards grabbed her arms, dragging her away from him, Sienna watched Gabriel sink onto the sofa, clutching his bleeding shoulder, staring at the floor. He looked broken, but Sienna knew something he didn't. As they dragged her past the hallway mirror, she saw a flash of red. The iPad. It wasn't in her room where she left it. It was sitting on the hallway console table. And standing next to it, pretending to be terrified and crying into a handkerchief, was the housekeeper. "Maria." Sienna locked eyes with Maria. The old woman didn't look scared. She looked smug. And then Sienna remembered. Maria didn't work for Gabriel. Maria was a transfer from the Rossi estate, part of a peace offering 5 years ago. It wasn't a hack. It was a sleeper agent. But before Sienna could scream the truth, the door to the guest room slammed shut, and the lock clicked. She was trapped, and the real traitor was still out there, holding the keys to the castle. The lock clicked shut with a finality that echoed in Sienna's bones. She stood in the center of the guest room, her hands shaking, her breath coming in short, jagged gasps. She wasn't trapped because she was guilty. She was trapped because she was the only one who saw the snake in the grass. Maria. Sienna squeezed her eyes shut, replaying the last 10 minutes. The iPad on the hallway table, the look of triumph in the old housekeeper's eyes. Maria had been with the Santoro family for years. She washed Gabriel's clothes, cooked his meals, and had keys to every room, including the server room. Think, Sienna, she whispered to herself. Think. Down the hall, she could hear muted voices. Gabriel was shouting orders. Dominic was probably dragging Caleb to the soundproofed basement, and Maria was likely making tea, pretending to be the terrified grandmother figure, all while texting Don Rossi that the shields were down. Sienna ran to the door and pounded on it. Gabriel, listen to me, it's Maria. Silence. She ran to the window. It was sealed shut, bulletproof glass, 30 stories up, no exit. She looked around the room desperately. A heavy brass lamp, a silk robe, a silver tray with a crystal carafe of water, and then the handle of the door turned. Sienna froze. She grabbed the heavy crystal carafe, backing away into the shadows of the corner. The door creaked open. It wasn't Gabriel. Maria stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. She was holding a fresh tray tea, bandages, and a small, innocuous-looking syringe. "Shh, child," Maria said, her voice dripping with fake maternal concern. "Mr. Santoro asked me to bring you something to calm your nerves." Sienna gripped the carafe tighter. "He didn't send you." Maria paused. The sweet, grandmotherly smile didn't vanish. It curdled. It twisted into something cold and mocking. "Smart girl," Maria said, setting the tray down on the dresser. "Too smart for a stray cat." "You opened the elevator," Sienna accused, her voice trembling but loud. "You used my iPad." "Of course I did," Maria said, picking up the syringe and tapping it. "Rossi pays better, and honestly, Gabriel is too soft. He should have killed you the night he met you. Instead, he brought a weakness into his house." "He'll kill you," Sienna hissed. "He won't have time," Maria said, moving toward her. "Because you are going to have a tragic overdose right now. A guilt-ridden suicide after betraying the man you love. And while Gabriel is weeping over your body, Rossi's men will come up the service elevator. I just unlocked again." Sienna's heart stopped. "You unlocked it again? 5 minutes ago." Maria grinned. "They're on their way up." Maria lunged. For an older woman, she was fast, but Sienna was fighting for her life. As Maria reached for her arm with the needle, Sienna swung the heavy crystal carafe with both hands. Smash! The crystal shattered against Maria's shoulder. The housekeeper screamed. Dropping the syringe, it skittered across the floor, sliding under the bed. "You little bitch," Maria snarled, pulling a small, pearl-handled pistol from her apron pocket. Sienna didn't think. She dove. She tackled Maria around the waist, driving her into the wall. The gun went off. Bang! The bullet shattering the vanity mirror. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs. Maria was strong, fueled by adrenaline, clawing at Sienna's face. Sienna kicked, scratched, and bit, screaming as loud as she could. "Gabriel, Gabriel!" The door exploded inward. It wasn't opened. It was kicked off its hinges. Gabriel stood in the frame, his white shirt soaked in blood from his shoulder wound, his gun raised. Dominic was right behind him. Gabriel took in the scene instantly, Sienna on the floor, bleeding from a scratch on her cheek, pinning Maria down. Maria, holding a gun. "Drop it!" Gabriel roared, the sound shaking the walls. Maria looked at Gabriel. She knew it was over. A look of pure spite crossed her face. She didn't drop the gun. She swung it toward Sienna's head. Bang! Bang! 2 shots rang out. Maria's body jerked violently, then went limp. The gun clattered from her hand. Gabriel had fired without blinking. A perfect, clean shot to the chest. Silence rushed back into the room, heavy and ringing. Sienna scrambled backward, gasping for air, staring at the body of the woman who had tried to kill her. She looked up at Gabriel. He lowered his gun, his face pale as a sheet. He dropped to his knees, ignoring his own injuries, and pulled Sienna into his arms. "I've got you," he rasped, burying his face in her hair. "I've got you. I'm sorry. God. Sienna. I'm so sorry." Sienna clung to him, sobbing into his ruined shirt. She unlocked the elevator again. Rossi's men. "They're coming." Gabriel pulled back, his eyes hardening into diamonds. He looked at Dominic. "Did you hear her?" Gabriel barked. Dominic nodded, already speaking into his radio. "Team Alpha, secure the service entrance. Kill anything that isn't family. Go." Gabriel didn't join them. He picked Sienna up in his arms, lifting her effortlessly despite his wound. "Put me down," Sienna whispered, weaky. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," Gabriel growled, carrying her out of the room, stepping over the shattered door. "I am never letting you out of my sight again." 6 months later. The sprawling estate in the Hamptons was fortress secure, but today it looked like a fairy tale. White roses covered every surface. A string quartet played softly near the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Sienna stood in front of the mirror in the master bedroom, smoothing the lace of her gown. It wasn't an emerald green dress this time. It was white, pure, blinding white. Nervous. She turned. Gabriel was leaning against the doorframe. He looked devastating in a black tuxedo, his hair slightly longer now, the scar on his shoulder hidden beneath the fabric. "Terrified," Sienna admitted. "There are 300 people down there. 300 people who work for me," Gabriel reminded her, walking over. "And half of them are terrified of you." Sienna laughed. "Me, why?" "Because," Gabriel said, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her flush against him. "You're the woman who took down a Rossi assassin with a water pitcher. The legend of Sienna Santoro is already bigger than mine." "Sienna Santoro?" She tested the name. "It sounds dangerous." "It is," Gabriel murmured, leaning down to kiss the hollow of her throat. "We cleaned house. Sienna. Caleb is gone. Rossi is retired permanently. The city is ours." He pulled back, reaching into his pocket. He didn't pull out a ring this time. He pulled out a small, velvet book. "What is this?" Sienna asked. "My vows," Gabriel said, his eyes serious. "But I wanted to tell you the real ones before we go out there, before the performance starts." He took her hand, placing it over his heart. She could feel the steady, powerful thrum of it beneath his suit. "I spent my life building walls," Gabriel whispered. "I thought power was keeping people out. I thought safety was silence." He kissed her palm. "Then you sat on my lap in a crowded club, and you burned my walls down. You didn't just save yourself that night. Sienna, you saved me." Sienna's eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Gabriel. I worship you, Sienna," he corrected. "Till death do us part, and knowing us, death will have to fight very hard to take either of us." There was a knock on the door. "Boss, it's time." Gabriel wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. He offered her his arm, the same way he had that first night at the Pierre Hotel. But this time, it wasn't a transaction. It wasn't a game. "Ready. Mrs. Ao." Santoro. Sienna took his arm. She looked at the man who had been her captor, her protector, and now, her husband. "Ready," she said. And together, they walked out of the room, out of the shadows, and into the light. And that is the story of Sienna and Gabriel, from a desperate escape in a VIP lounge to ruling the city together. They proved that sometimes the safest place to hide is in the arms of the devil himself. What did you think of that twist with Maria? Did you suspect the housekeeper? Or did you think Caleb was working alone? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single theory. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of Mafia romance, betrayal, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. I upload brand new dramatic stories every week, and you won't want to miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.